This episode is brought to you by Focusrite, the interface company who makes interfaces for recording podcasts, music, or any audio. I started my journey with Focusrite and this podcast in March of 2016. Over 120 episodes later, I can genuinely say that my life and business have completely changed in very public and verifiable ways. In addition to having interviewed company founders, CEOs, New York Times bestselling authors, TEDx speakers, and even celebrity athletes, I got sponsored, signed by a premier talent agency, became a keynote speaker, and now I'm building a training and development company that serves the industry I come from. Focusrite products produce amazing sound quality, are easy to use, and are a great fit for new and experienced podcasters alike. The Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 and 18i8 have been my primary tools that have allowed me to build a platform, a personal brand, and now a business through content creation. So if you're a new podcaster looking to start a show, or an experienced podcaster looking to upgrade your sound quality, I recommend you check out Focusrite at focusrite.com. That's FOCUSRITE.com. What's happening, everyone? Julian Placino here, creator of the Pathways to Success podcast. Today in studio, I have Howard Goodman, who is an accounting expert and CPA. Howard, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Julian. It's great to be here. I'm very excited to be on the podcast and help other people to motivate them and to just move them forward in their businesses.
Awesome. And shout out to, it was Jason Osborne, right, who introduced us,
Jason,
previous guest on the
great
podcast.
Guy, been a client of mine for a few years, and great to have the referral from him, and I love helping him, and again, let's help some more people.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Howard, let's kind of jump into things. Before we jump into the topics, and obviously given your background, we're talking about accounting for business. How did you first get into accounting?
Sure, yeah, basically my dad had studied a little bit of accounting when he was in college, and I guess maybe being a daddy's boy in some way and always looking up to my father, I figured if he's doing it and he's enjoying it, I think that's something that I'd like to do too. Of course, needless to say, I was good at math. That's sort of a basic for starting in accounting. And I set my sights pretty high. Originally, I wanted to make sure I went to the best school and started with a big firm. And so I wound up, after my high school education, of course, going to the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania.
Wharton School?
The Wharton School, which, believe it or not, at least at the time, it had the only accounting degree program of all the Ivy League schools. So I'm not saying that I could have gotten into Harvard or Princeton or anything like that, but Penn was an obvious choice for me because it did have an accounting degree. Yeah.
Awesome.
Right. And so once you go there, as long as you do substantially well GPA-wise, usually because of the type of school it is, the companies come there.
Yeah.
Right. So the big four firms, the Price Waterhouse Coopers, the Deloittes, they all come recruiting young kids. And so that's when I got my first taste of the corporate world. I really grew up in sort of a middle-class background.
Yeah.
And here people were coming for me. And they were inviting me to come to New York and eating at the top of the Twin Towers and renting black town cars and stuff like that to ferry us around. So that was my first taste of the successful life, I guess. And once I had that, I never wanted to give it up, and I never wanted to go back. So that sort of affirmed for me that I want to in this New York, Wall Street sort of environment.
Yeah.
And that's where I spent the first 15 or 20 years of my career, it turns out.
Wow.
Yep.
So now you transitioned from that. So walk us through kind of
exactly
that story.
So basically, as I mentioned, I had been working in the Wall Street field for many, many years. And then, as most people know, about 10 years ago, the Great Recession happened. At the time, I was actually working as a hedge fund controller and lost my position there because that company had less and less business. And I sort of came to the point in my life where I was somewhere around 40 years old, give or take.
Yeah.
And that's the time when a lot of people sort of take a step back and say, well, I've been working for 20 years now for someone else.
Yeah.
I've actually built up a whole bunch of experience. Now, what can I do with that experience and start to make my life my own? And so with the help of friends, I think you'll hear on a lot of the various podcasts, people who get started for themselves, they couldn't really do it without the support of their family or friends.
Yeah.
And so I had a very good friend working for the FDIC. At the time, unfortunately, the FDIC was starting to close banks around the country, and they needed additional help. They were looking for managers to help them do this work. So a friend of mine introduced me to them, and that's when I basically got my first job where I was responsible for my own work, and I was responsible for managing a large group of people. And basically, the success was going to depend on me. Whether I got further jobs and further contracts from them depended on me. From there, the story gets a little more interesting, actually, Julian. So what happened at the time, my first wife was actually from Argentina.
Okay.
And at the time I was working for the FDIC, she decided she wanted to move back home. She was homesick. We had 2 small children, but of course I said, well, I have to do this for love, to save the marriage. You do whatever you need to do. I'm a very traditional, fair and family-oriented type of guy. So my ex-wife and children moved down to Argentina first because we had a house here in Texas that we had to sell. This wasn't a great time to sell because, as I mentioned, this was during the Great Recession 10 years ago. So while I was basically finishing out my contract with the FDIC, I was trying to sell the house. Once the house finally sold after 3 or 4 months, I said, wow. I woke up and said, my family's in Argentina and I have no income. And how am I going to get a job in Argentina? So luckily, and I do believe luck is a big factor, the combination of luck and the motivation, which I had, I need a job. Central Market here in Plano actually decided for the first time to have an international food fair focusing on a particular company. A particular country, and that country was Argentina. And they were inviting chefs and winemakers, and not just any chefs and winemakers, but the top of the top, the creme de la creme. So if you would have thought of an Anthony Bourdain or Paula Deen or something like that, this is the Argentine level of that, and they were coming here to Plano. And I was, again, by myself. I didn't have family or friends who were interested. And so when they had these, wine tastings and dinners or whatnot, I said, well, I'm just going to go myself because I just want to meet these people. Naturally, I'm actually an introvert, as most accountants are, and it was very hard for me to drag myself out of the house. So I went to some of these events, and one of the presenters was a Laura Catena, which at the time I didn't know. They were the largest producers and exporters of wine in Argentina. And so before the dinner and the tasting started, I just went up to her and I introduced myself. I said, my name is Howard Goodman. I have family in Argentina. I'm going to be moving there soon. I didn't, of course, say I don't have a job. You don't introduce yourself to people that way. That I'm homeless and jobless and I've sold my home. And so she said, oh, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm an accountant. And she asked me about my educational background, and I told her. And then I said, I have a family. And at the time, I was shuttling back and forth literally every other week between Dallas and Buenos Aires so I could stay in touch with my kids. And so basically she said, well, my father, Dr. Ernesto Catena, is, the top guy at the company. Why don't the next time you come down to Argentina, have an interview with him? And literally 2 weeks later, I found myself in this gorgeous, opulent mansion in Buenos Aires on a Saturday evening, having a fireside interview with the top winemaker in Argentina.
Get out of town.
And right on the spot, he hired me as a financial consultant because they needed somebody to help them with their budgeting and everything related to that. And so I spent the next year and a half in Argentina working for the company is called Bodegas Esmeralda, but essentially it's the Catena family. And I wound up learning about the wine industry and how wine is produced. I went out to their bodegas in the Andes Mountains, and it was a fantastic experience.
Amazing. Do you speak Spanish fluently?
I do speak Spanish. Hablo no el español, pero castellano, que es el español de Argentina, which is a whole other thing. So
right on, man.
One of the things I really do enjoy is being bilingual. It helps me a lot here in Texas. Obviously, there are a lot of native Spanish speakers. And it just makes me feel more comfortable in a variety of communities, which I really like.
So is that what started your individual practice? Like that's your first time kind of?
That was really the first time where truly it was a one-on-one experience with a family-operated business, which is sort of my niche. I really, really enjoy helping families, whether it's large, like the Catena family, or a small mom and pop that maybe they have a retail pharmacy, or maybe they've got a t-shirt printing company that they're trying to get off the ground. That's when I found my niche, that these are really the people I want to help. I don't want to help, and forgive me for saying the names, Citigroup, I love you Citigroup, and all those other big companies and big banks, but that's when I really found that I like the one-on-one interaction. I like that people are depending on me and my expertise to help them. And then when I do help them and I do the work, the thanks that come from that is much greater than a 3% raise at the end of the year, or even a nice bonus from a corporate entity. When you get a genuine thanks, or you get a case of wine, or somebody tells you, let's say one of my clients is a rancher, and they say, hey, why don't you come up to the ranch for the weekend? Or
That's
something,
cool.
I really appreciate what you've done for me. That's just changed my total outlook on what work is. When I was growing up, in the 70s and the 80s, I think that was a time that corporate America was changing. It used to be in the generation prior to that, let's say my parents' generation, my dad, for example, worked 35 years for the same company. That's what people expected. They expected to be locked in and get a pension. Around the 80s or so, when I started my corporate career, things were shifting a little bit. Companies were being taken over. There were mergers. You couldn't really expect, to be with a company forever. You didn't have that stability. There would be layoffs or what have you. So when I did this transition, and I found that, wow, here's something I can do, and people will compensate me for my expertise, and I control my own destiny. That's just a life changer. And I think what's great about a lot of the millennial generation, as they're called now, is that they realize that from the very beginning. I'm not going to depend on a corporate parent to take care of me and my family and give me a pension. I'm just going to do what I'm passionate about, and I'm just going to go for it, and I may have to try 2 things or 3 things or do 5 things at once, but one of them is going to pop out. And right now, I learned that lesson late in life, and now what I'm loving doing is meeting all these people and then saying, hey, what did you do? How did you get here? Let me help you. There's things that you may not know about that you need to do, unfortunately, whether the government imposes them or just life imposes them, but I can help you take care of that. I can help you move forward. Because what my goal is and what my tag is, or the elevator speech, so to speak, is that I'm here to help you sleep at night. Because there's nothing worse for an entrepreneur or a small business owner to think, did I pay my taxes? Am I putting away enough for taxes? Am I recording everything right? I think my things are a mess. What you want to do is do what you love and go out there and do it and not worry about anything else. And the service that I provide is I provide that ability to sleep at night from a financial perspective for people.
I love it. And on a very deep sense, as you know, I'm starting a company and it's working, and you're right. My motivation is, how do I grow it? I really just want someone who's better at me than this to take care of it, right?
Right, exactly.
So I have a lot of entrepreneurs that tune into the podcast. So make the case for us, because I'll be honest with you, some people don't think accounting is the most exciting thing. But why is it important part, a vital part to any business?
Sure. The most important thing for a business is, of course, to make money. And I hate to sound like a pure capitalist or something like that. But if you don't want to call it making money, call it getting what you need to survive, to enjoy life, to provide for your family, to be able to hang out with friends. Money, for better or for worse, gives you the freedom to do what you want and to be what you want. And so the most important thing is to know is, while you pursue your passion, are you making money? Are you able to live doing this? Because just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean you can live from it. And you really don't want to depend on other people ultimately, or the government or anything like that. And so what accounting does is, accounting lets you separate out what's essentially your personal life from your business life. Because when everything is mixed together,
that makes sense,
right? You don't really know, like, is what I'm doing successful? You may call yourself successful. Let's say you get an inheritance of $50,000 from your family, and you're sort of living off that and pursuing your dream, and that's great. But if that $50,000 starts dwindling to $40,000 and $30,000, you have to be self-aware enough to say, my dream is going to end. I eventually need financing. I need to be successful in what I'm doing. So the first thing I tell business people, or the first question I ask, is, are you separating your personal business from your business? Do you have a separate business checking account? Are you tracking?
I feel like you're talking to me.
I am, in a way, and I'm looking forward to working with you closely and not hearing that noise very much. But that's really the key, because you want to be able to sit down at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, first of all, and saying, am I making money, and is this enough to live on? That, of course, goes along with personal budgeting and everything else. The second part of accounting really is taxes. And taxes are an unfortunate part of life in pretty much every part of the world, whether they tax you 80% in Sweden or 20% here, it doesn't matter, everyone pays taxes. However, luckily for us, the government does have certain rules and regulations that allow you to save on taxes, which essentially is leaving more money in your pocket. The key thing is, and for entrepreneurs especially, and a lot of people don't know this, is they can set up their own 401k plans or solo 401k plans. People tend to think, oh, if I have a job with a big company, I join their 401k, and that's what normal people do for retirement. Well, as a business person and an entrepreneur, you can establish one yourself. And not only that, as an entrepreneur, you could put your profits in there, and you can sock away literally over $50,000 legally and tax-free in this account every year if your business was successful. A standard employee can only put away maybe $14,500 a year. So there's a benefit to being an entrepreneur, but this is the type of thing, and it kind of goes rambling, and then it's taxes and accounting. But ultimately, the story is you can have an extra $5,000 or $10,000 in your pocket at the end of the year to do what you want to do if you have a guide, if you have an expert telling you, take your money and put it here, save some money and put it here. A little bit of this is what mom and dad would say, save for a rainy day. But there are certain ways to save for a rainy day that are actually tax beneficial and put more money in your pocket.
Gotcha. All right. So let's kind of jump into things. I know there's sort of 3 topics that you're passionate about sharing here, and one of them is the importance of the entrepreneur to sort of focus on what they're doing and also have someone else focus on accounting. Why is that beneficial?
Right. Basically, when you're a salesperson, in a way, you have to think of your business as if you were an hourly worker. If you work at McDonald's or something, you make a certain amount of dollars per hour. If you're an accountant or a lawyer, you make a certain amount of dollars. So what you have to think, again, is from a very corporate business perspective. I, as a salesperson, I, as a manufacturer of my product, if I focused on this and did only this, I could maybe make $100 an hour or $150 an hour charging for my time, or maybe $40 an hour, whatever it is. Then when you have to sit down at night and you have to fill out those tax forms, if you decide to do it for yourself, and if you keep your checkbook, or even if you go into QuickBooks or QuickBooks Online or some other software like that, you are spending time, you're not making money. And if you paid someone else to do that, and you calculate, well, let's see, I paid an accountant $50 an hour or $100 an hour to do this accounting, I could be making $200 with that same hour selling my product. And of course, accountants, you don't actually use them that much. So if you look at it even more on an annual basis, right? What if I paid my accountant $2,000 a year to do my books, right? Over the course of the year, well, God, I must spend 100 hours, just typing in what checks I write and who I pay and paying people by credit card. If you took away all of that operational, stuff that you do and the accounting and the bookkeeping, you'd have to say, wait a minute, I'm paying him $2,000. I'm spending 200 hours doing this. It's $10 an hour. I can make more than $10 an hour if I was out selling, if I was out marketing my product and doing what I love to do. Again, if you're a professional providing your service, why am I doing this work myself? And I think that's part of the key that I try to educate people on. Is a lot of people are control freaks. Entrepreneurs are very self-oriented. I'm the best person to do this. I need to be doing this. But the fact of the matter is, and it's a very hard lesson to learn, is that you not only can't you do everything yourself, but you shouldn't necessarily do everything yourself. And I think a great example of that is if anyone's ever read the Tim Ferriss books, and the 4-Hour Work Week and whatnot, the whole point of that really is there's other people to do your work for you. Let's consider what you're doing, what you love to do. That's not work anymore, right? This is what you love to do. That's your goal.
It blends together.
Right. Accounting is work. Have somebody else do that for you. And not only that, it's not a matter of laziness or just, well, I'm selfish and I just want to do what I like. You'll be more profitable too, because if you're passionate about what you do and you have a good product and a profitable product, you'll be making more money. So why wouldn't you use an accountant, an outsourced secretary, or anything else that you could outsource, someone to handle your mail. It's all in Tim Ferriss's book, basically.
So when does it make sense to outsource that and get a partner? Like right at the beginning, or when you meet a certain level of revenue? When does it make sense?
Right. That's a very good point. So what I generally say to people is that, if you have a business, once you're making, let's say in the 6 figures or something like that, that's probably a good time to have someone else do it. In the beginning, you do want to understand your own business, and you want to see your own flow, and it wouldn't even help your accountant much if you were just starting out and say, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't even know my own business, because that just leads to disorganization. And if you're disorganized and you don't quite understand what you're doing yet, that will result in a lot of confusion for the accountant and more hours and more billings, and that's not something you want either.
Got it.
So you definitely want to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, so that when the accountant looks at your initial records, again, whether they're handwritten or not, you could explain to them, oh, I pay these people to do this, I pay these people to do this, this is what I'm selling. Because another thing that the accountant does that I haven't quite brought up yet is an accountant, and if they're lucky enough like myself to have now 30 years of business experience in various fields, an accountant can give you advice and say, I've seen someone like this. I've seen someone who's done this. I've worked with this software. Again, let's take the pharmacy, for example. If I met another pharmacy owner, I could say, my other pharmacy clients use this software. It helps them be much more efficient. They use this robot. That's what they call the machine to separate the pills. They use this robot. I see you're not using one, or you're using this old model. So my detailed experience with people and who they're using, what vendors they're using, it allows me to provide advice, and it allows you as an entrepreneur, and I don't just mean you, Julian, of course,
totally.
To ask me, I need this service, I need a CRM, I need customer, relationship management software. What do you know? What have you seen out there?
Interesting.
And that's something else that I can provide personally, and any accountant really who has experience can provide.
I never really thought about that. That does actually make a lot of sense, because you're touching all these different businesses, and all of them have different sort of levels of success, and you can help share kind of those best practices.
That's right.
I love it.
And that's part of what I love about what I've been doing too, because again, the first 20 years of my career were in banking for the most part. It's a very specific niche industry, investment banking. They make movies about it because it seems so foreign to people, it seems so interesting. But what I love about what I'm doing now, again, is through my dozens of client contacts, again, I may have pharmacies, I have a customer who does the green screens, at conferences and parties and things like that. I have customers that are in the patent licensing field. All of these things, some of them are retail, some of them are services. Some of them are either other accountants. I don't have the time to do this. I'm doing my own accounting.
Other accountants, how about that? What an interesting conversation.
So really, what it comes down to is gathering all that knowledge. And that's what I love. I love learning more than anything else, and that's why I love meeting new people. I love getting into new fields because it just builds on my experience, it builds on my knowledge. I like to think it makes me more interesting at parties because I can talk to almost anybody about what they do. That's really what I love about it.
Love it. Personal taxes, you say your recommendation is ask questions and demand answers. What do you mean by that?
Right. So a lot of people who do come to me for tax work, what they say is, I'm unhappy with my tax accountant, I don't like them, they don't spend any more time with me, they've grown too big, I've gone to H&R Block and I feel like I'm dealing with a big corporate entity who doesn't care about me. True, right? So what I want people to be able to do when they come to me is I want them to ask me questions. It's not about dropping off your papers and I'm going to stick things into some computer software and then return you a tax return. Because that's not the service I provide. If people wanted that, I tell them, use TurboTax. If you're comfortable with it, use TurboTax, go ahead, go to H&R Block. What you're paying me for is you're paying me to take time to sit down with you, to interview you, almost as you're interviewing me now, find out about their family, their interests, what they want from their lives, are they saving for retirement, and then make sure they're getting the benefits of all the tax deductions that they can get. This especially applies to business owners, right? Because business owners, you can deduct, as you've probably heard, almost everything. And there's even things that people don't think about. The mileage on their car, if you're selling a service, if you're driving your car to your client's appointment, you can deduct the miles on that. It always surprises me how many people don't do that. Your cell phone, everybody has a cell phone, but if you've got a business, deduct your cell phone. You know, all this home office deductions, et cetera, et cetera. So what I try to do is really understand a person's situation. And I want them to ask me, I've heard about this. Right, you don't get to do that with an H&R Block necessarily. I tell people, call me up. I don't care if it's Saturday or Sunday. Just, I heard about this. My brother's doing this. Somebody told me I should take a loan from this bank. Is that a smart idea? Ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. And if you're working with someone now and you're paying what you think is a ridiculous amount of money for a CPA, let's say, to take your information, never speak to you, and then hand you back something you don't understand, you know, you should be demanding, I don't understand this. I want you to go through every line and tell me what this means. Why do I owe this year when I didn't know last year? How can I fix that? And you're paying someone for a service. I mean, you wouldn't think to go to a doctor and say, I'm afraid to ask them questions. I've got this pain, I'm not going to ask them, I hope they find it, right? That's what a lot of people do with their accountants. They go to the accountants basically saying, well, I'm not going to tell them anything and it doesn't seem like they want to talk to me. I hope they find me some deductions. That's not the way the relationship is supposed to work. I want people to come to me like a doctor. You know, whether it's fix it, and I do get that, I have a problem with the IRS, fix it, or it's just general checkup, it's my annual checkup, i.e. annual taxes. You know, I think I can do this, what did you hear about this, tell me about this. That's the kind of relationship I personally like to have, you know, with my clients.
So when you and I first met at Starbucks, you know, I was coming to you for accounting advice, and that's one of the things that I really appreciated about you. Number one, it's like you took the time to sort of educate me and not just tell me what, but also why. And for me, very analytical, I need to understand these kinds of things. And at least from my experience with you, you felt like more of like as a partner, actually, as like an essential component to my business versus just an accountant. You know what I mean? So,
exactly. Yeah, that's part of my tag too, on my business cards and whatever else is. I like to consider myself a trusted business partner. And to me, again, it's all about trust. Your ability to sleep at night, not having to think about it, it has to be based on trust. I trust Howard to do the right thing by me. I trust him if I give him my money and say, you know what, and I have clients who do this. Here's my bank account. You can log into my bank account. I want you paying my bills. I don't want to have to deal with it. The level of trust that is needed for me to be able to do that it has to be golden and rock solid. So people have to know that, you know, their money is my money. I'm not going to take an extra 10 cents from them. And I'm upfront. I'm almost effusive about it. I'm like, I want you to see what I'm doing. I want you, every time I make a money transfer, I want to tell you. And sometimes people say, no, I don't care. I know you're doing what you're doing, and that's fine. But I want to overemphasize to people that everything I do is above board. I want you to see everything I'm doing, because, you know, again, it's that trust. It's just like family. It's not only partners. I would almost be insulted if my clients didn't become my friends. I would feel really, really badly. I'm that type of person. I've been told that one of my biggest problems, if this were a job interview and you said, what's your biggest problem, or you know, what's the negative about you? My weakness is that I like to please everybody, and I want to make sure everyone's happy. So that's what I try to get in my client relationships too, is not only do I want them to be successful, which leads to my own success, but I want them to be happy, both with me and in their personal lives. So that all leads to my general philosophy about business and client relationships.
I love it. Well, let's close with one topic that is kind of, you know, sort of philosophical in the sense that, and I think it's a good conversation to have now, because honestly, I think sometimes people get businesses wrong, or some people associate making money bad. But like, is it possible to make a profit and have a high ethical standard? What do you think?
Yes, I absolutely believe that. I was raised in a pretty religious household. And so we would go to services all the time, every week. I still go very frequently. I'm an active member of my synagogue, actually. And so I always grew up with the strong belief that you shouldn't have to rely on tricking people or stealing from people in order to live well or be wealthy. I'll give you an example. I won't name the person who taught me this. But I knew someone once in a certain business selling a certain material. And the material came in boxes of 10. Right? So in theory, if you don't think in a way that's, you know, sort of conniving or whatnot, you would say, well, okay, I sell these in boxes of 10. But what he would do is there were similar items that came in boxes of 12. So he would unpack these items of 10 and put them in boxes of 12 and mix them up and say, I can only sell this to you in 12s, not 10, it comes in 12s. He makes 20% more profit, which is great. But it's not the way I would think, normally. But a lot of people run their businesses doing that. How can I take advantage? How can I, switch the facts around, and that sort of thing. What I like to do in my business, for example, just in my pricing structure, and I won't get into specifics, is I know that CPAs charge a certain amount and a relatively high dollar amount. When I looked at my business, I said, you know what, I pretty much work out of my house. I don't have a lot of overhead. I can charge people less. So in theory, could I charge the same as the top highest paid CPAs? I could. I have a Wharton education. I worked on Wall Street and all of this, but that's not really the people that, or that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to charge something that was fair. So I tend to charge a little bit less for essentially the same service, or I like to think it's a better service. And because I'm dealing with people who can maybe afford a little less, I wind up dealing with clients who maybe need me a little more. And that's, again, what I enjoy about the business. I enjoy helping people. I want to go to the elderly client and say, don't worry about this. Don't worry about your taxes. Or do this and you could save some taxes. And that's the joy I get out of my business. I like helping people. If it was, not that I don't want high net worth individuals as clients, that's not what I'm trying to say, but I would want to treat them as fairly as I treat everyone else. I don't want to go to people and say, oh, you make more. I don't have a sliding scale. These people are millionaires, so I'm going to charge them more money. To me, the ethical base is everybody gets charged the same amount because my services are worth the same to everybody. Thank you. I guess that's some sort of confirmation. Some people say if you sneeze, that means it's true.
There you go,
I guess,
right?
When you get the sound from the plumbing, that means it's true.
Out. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So that's, again, my standard. My standard is everyone is treated the same. No one gets treated differently. Everyone gets the same level of attention. And that's sort of what I mean by the ethical standard. Don't treat people differently. Don't try to switch things around or make people see things differently, or charge them more. It's just not what I do.
I love it. I love it. Howard, I learned a ton from you, man. How does our audience connect with you, learn more about you? Tell us all this.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a website, hgoodmancpa.com, so I encourage you to go there. I do have Facebook and Twitter feeds, so I do need to do a better job of going out and populating those and getting those around. But that's the primary way that you could find me, is the hgoodmancpa.com website. Of course, I'm sure you could always look up Howard Goodman CPA on the web. My office is actually based in Frisco, Texas, so you can look there. And again, I would appreciate anyone who wants to come to me. I don't charge for initial visits, as you know, or if people just want some information. Because again, I feel, or I enjoy just meeting people. I think that's the greatest part of starting a relationship, meeting people. And if things work out, that's great. And if people decide to use someone else or they don't need the CPA, that's great. Meeting people just leads to things like this great podcast. Again, I'm just honored to be here. I appreciate the opportunity, and good luck to everyone out there who's got their own business and trying to grow it. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing to do, and I'm glad to be a part of your ranks.
Awesome. Well, Howard, thank you very much for this, and we'll make sure to have all of his contact information in the show notes as well. So thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success podcast. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pathways to Success.